Hey, what's up everyone? Long time no see. If you watched my last video, you know what I've been up to. I've been running around doing all sorts of fun art stuff. I haven't had a time to put together my first advanced class yet, or video, so I wanted to go ahead and do another beginner video because I know everybody's been waiting on the next video and I didn't want to make you wait too long. So I'm up here at a wonderful location. This is called Hidden Valley Lake. And it's actually a lake on top of a mountain. We're sitting at just a little bit above 3,000 feet above sea level. So it's really neat. It's a little bit cooler. I think it's supposed to get into the 90s today. But up here we're right at about 75 degrees and sunny. So perfect location for a video and for a painting. And my first lesson for today is going to be about a checklist, because you can see I've got a different setup for my palette here. I'm using a little smaller palette and I don't have my easel set up. And that's because as I was packing everything, I totally forgot to get my big palette and my easel. So that being said, see if you can put yourself together a little checklist for all your plein air supplies, and it'll save you in the long run. That way you can kind of check off and make sure you have everything before you head out. I'll probably start doing that. But another good lesson is perseverance. So if you get out there and you find that you're missing something that you need, see if you can work with what you got and make it happen. So that's what we're going to do. Now, I'm going to be working with the same three primary colors, the bright primaries across the top, and then the duller primaries, or what I'm calling the primaries, across the side here. So we've got cadmium red light, cadmium yellow light, ultramarine blue, and I'm going to squeeze out some more of these. We've got, this is yellow ochre, burnt sienna, and ivory black. And if you're familiar with the videos, then you know that this is kind of a system that I've set up so that you can control the intensity of your colors. If you're wanting very vibrant colors, you can use these vibrant primaries to mix them. And then if you're wanting some less vibrant colors, you can mix them with these duller earth tone primaries. And you can get different mixtures in between for varying degrees of intensity. And another thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to whip up my white paint. So I've got the white paint here. I use titanium white, and I'm just going to put some drops of my medium, which is Galkyd painting medium mixed with Gamsol paint thinner, and I mix it about 2/3 Galkyd to about 1/3 Gamsol, and this creates my medium. So this is what I'm dipping into as I paint, and it's also what I mix up into my white paint before I get started, and it'll make the paint flow a little bit more easily as I go. So the first step I'm going to want to do is think about toning my canvas, and I've used different colors in the past videos, but I'm generally using one of or more of these earth tone colors to tone my canvas, and I don't want anything too vibrant underneath, but I do want something to kill this white. So because I'm working with a lot of greens out here, sometimes it's nice when you have all these different greens in the middle of the summer to tone your canvas with burnt sienna. And this is because the red, this toned down red color, is going to look really nice popping through all the greens. And we just want to do this to kind of kill some of the white, so that it's not so overpowering and glaring in our face when we're first starting. Like I said, you can experiment with different tones. You can use yellow ochre and black to make kind of a greenish tone, or you can use just the ivory black. The trick here is to not get too much pigment on the canvas. So you can see I'm dipping down into the medium, and I've just got a little paint, and I'm putting it on here, but then I'm wanting to wipe most of the paint back off, so that what I'm left with is a stain. So this is a nice light red tone, and like I said, just enough to kind of get that white to go away. Now I want you to go right in with burnt sienna and ultramarine blue and mix sort of a dark stain and look at your subject and start to think about big shapes. Now, if you've watched the videos before, and if you haven't, I recommend you go back and check out, you know, I've got about 11 or 12 different demos on there, so go check them out because there's a lot of information that I'm building on as I go. So I want to think about my big shapes. So you can see I've got these dark trees over here on the right. We've got the bank out in the distance and then the distant hillside. These are going to be my main darks. And what I want to try to do is tie them together into an interesting shape. So, so I'm going to squint down my eyes and try to look at the whole picture. And you know, what we don't want to have is half darks and half lights. So it's good to kind of decide right off the bat, do I want more darks than lights or do I want more lights than darks? And I think in this case, I want more darks than lights. So I want to exaggerate this shape of this bank here. If you have to, you can hang on to your canvas when you're doing this. I'm going to exaggerate the shape of this bank here and really kind of play it up. And we don't want this too thick because we want to leave room to go darker as we paint. So and there's not an exact science to this color. It's a little bit of burnt sienna, a little bit of ultramarine blue. You can make it warmer or cooler depending on how much ultramarine blue you have or how much burnt sienna you have. What I want your eye is to go into this area, explore it a little bit, and then kind of come out here and then have the little bit of the lake coming in here and some of these clouds. So I'm going to use big sweeping gestures with the way that the shapes go. I'm going to push your eye up into this direction here. And I want to think about where my center of interest is going to be. So I've got this nice little trees here where the lake comes in, and I don't want to put anything right dead center. So I want to be aware of that. So I'm thinking that I want to draw your eye right into this area. So we're going to have a lot of lively stuff going on. There's some bright greens that will work into this area as we go. But everything that I'm going to be doing is going to be pushing your eye into this area right here. So you can see even when I draw my bank, I'm going to exaggerate the shape of it and really use this directional shape to push your eye over into this area right here, which is going to be where our center of interest is. And you can see that I'm not too concerned with making trees or leaves or flowers or anything really at this stage except for big dark shapes. And that's what you want to do. You want to resist the urge to get into too much detail at this stage. And if you start to run out of medium or any colors, be sure you're putting out plenty because you don't want to start skimping. That'll really affect the painting. And the great thing about doing it this way is that you can kind of judge your composition right off the bat, so you don't have to wait until the end to see if you're going to need to adjust things. So I already like the way that this shape is coming together here on the canvas, so I know that in the long run I'm going to be happy with the design. And so that's why I want you to think about big shapes first. And this is just a general dark. You know, the more you can tie this dark together, the better off you're going to be. There's a couple different names I've thought about giving this series of demos that don't necessarily relate to the painting. One could be the evolution of Kyle's beard, and the other could be watching Kyle fight his easel. Because these are both things that I notice that come up in the videos a lot. So don't worry if your equipment is a little shaky. You know, just push through it. There's always going to be things that you have to deal with that aren't perfect, but that's part of the game, and that's part of what makes plein air painting exciting, is that ultimately it's the result of a successful battle. You know, you're not in your studio, you don't have a comfy chair to sit in, you don't have air conditioning or heating, so the result is going to be something that really tells a tale about the whole process. And see how I'm leaving some light down here? So this is going to suggest some areas of the bank where the rocks are. So we've got some rocks there, and then there's also some grass. So, you know, I'm not really painting rocks, but I'm aware that that's where they're going to be, and I'm leaving them there. Okay, so this is going to be my dark shape. So general dark, and the next thing that we're going to do is going to go in with our darker darks. So we can do this by using the exact same colors, burnt sienna and ultramarine blue, but we're going to get more paint on the paper towel. And don't worry about brushes, we'll get to them later. So now we can look out here, squint down and say, okay, well, where are our darker shapes? So there's a little shadow here. And you're not going to have any real darks off in the distance. You want these dark shapes to be in the foreground. And this is where, when you hear painters talk about rhythm, this is really where rhythm comes into play, because you're going to be creating patterns with these darker shapes. And that's going to create rhythm in your painting. Just like rhythm in music is, you know, repetition of beats. So we're going to have repetition of little dark areas throughout here. And again, I'm thinking about how to pull your eye into this area. So, you know, there might not necessarily be an exact triangle shape here, but I'm going to go ahead and make one to help push your eye in. And then that balances kind of this triangle shape right here too. These are things that you'll learn to do instinctively as you paint, the more you paint. But at this stage in your development, it's good to go ahead and try to think about them, because that way you'll know what it is that you're doing and why you're doing it. I always say you should have a reason for everything that you're doing on the canvas. If you find yourself just aimlessly painting away and not really aware of what you're doing on the canvas or why you're doing it, it might be time to stop and step back and think about what direction you want your piece to go in. And you can see I'm bunching up my paper towel, dipping it down into the paint, getting a nice bit of paint on there. We want a good bit of paint on our paper towel, or else we're going to be dealing with all those little pieces of lint from the paper towel. That's probably a sign that you don't have enough paint on your paper towel. Alright, so I've got some darker darks right out here in this little secondary area, but I want to be careful that they're not super dark. And I don't want any darks out on this bank, because this bank is way back there. And remember, we want our darkest darks to be up near the front. They're going to help pull that area forward. So just dealing with shapes. So now that we've done our darks and then our darker darks, the next step is going to be what I call local color. And this is going to be our big broad areas of color. So not our brightest greens and not our darkest greens, but sort of the middle ground. You know, same thing with the sky. Can we find a blue that's sort of in the middle of all this blue? And then we can work variations into it as we progress. So with the same consistency that we did our darker darks, which, you know, we don't want it too light or it's not going to really come through. We want some paint on the paper towel, but we also want some medium. I'm going to mix up a nice green that is basically cadmium yellow light and ultramarine blue. And just with the same simplicity that we used to paint the darks, we're going to lay in some of this green. And it's okay if it mixes a little bit with what's down there. And this is where the sunlight's hitting these trees. I'm not going to paint this green into where the shadowed areas are. I just want to hit where the sunlight is. Also, there's grass down here in the foreground, and for the sake of simplicity and tying together my painting, I'm going to use this same green. We can break it up and add some variations later, but I'm going to bring this same green down here into this area. And then there's also some areas over here where there's green and it's kind of poking through some of these shadows. Now I'm going to put a little bit more blue in the green, and then I'm going to add a touch of white. And what this is going to do is going to lighten it, and it's going to make it cooler. And that's what happens to colors as they recede into the distance. Atmospheric perspective means that colors are going to get cooler and lighter as they travel off into the distance. And then we can even go a little bit lighter and hit this distant bank here. So you see, by making the green warmer as I come forward, it's already starting to add some depth and distance in by pulling the foreground forward and pushing these greens back. And we can also dull down the green a little bit by making a dull green using our earth color green, which is yellow ochre and ivory black. It's going to make kind of a grayish green. Mix that right into the vibrant green that we were using. And then this is going to be helpful too for some of these areas that are back here in the distance, because it's taking the color out of it a little bit. Alright, so before we get too developed with that area, let's look at the water and the sky. And this is where you really want to pay attention to value. So I think you can see, yeah, you can see on the video that the sky and the water have similar colors in them, because basically the water is reflecting the sky. But what happens is the sky is a little bit lighter than the water. So if we squint down, we can see this. If you took a black and white photograph of this, you can even do it. You could take a photograph of the screen with your phone and then take it into Photoshop and make it black and white, and you'll see that the sky is lighter. So I want to be aware of how light and how dark places are. And there's also some clouds in the sky, so I'm going to take a little bit of yellow ochre and mix it with my white and make a nice cloud color. Now you see there's clouds are going every which way, but because I'm designing my painting, I want the clouds to lead your eye into this, so we want to keep all this movement this way. So instead of having clouds all over the place, I'm just going to have one simple shape here of clouds that pulls your eye in down to this area. So this is going to create a nice zigzag throughout the piece, because you can see that we've got this movement here balanced by this movement here. And that was just a little bit of yellow ochre and a lot of white. We want the yellow ochre in there because the clouds are being illuminated by the sunlight, so they're going to be a little warm. You know, you look up there and they look white, but if you just use pure white, it's going to be too cold and it's not going to give your sky luminosity. Same thing with the blue of the sky. You know, you don't want a straight up blue. You want a little bit of warmth in it. And so we could do that by starting with a little bit of yellow, and then we're going to go into the blue. So I've got a blue here that's a nice light blue color, but it has a little bit of yellow in it. So again, nice and thick now. I'm going to go ahead and use this nice thick paint. And as we go up in the sky, it's going to get a little bit darker, so I'm going to add a little bit more of this blue, and you can see that changes. And see how I'm not covering up all of this warm color? We want some of that warm color in there because it creates interest and variety in the sky, so it's not just a solid flat blue. And now we can put a little tiny bit of red in this color, and we can make the color for the water. So it's going to be a little bit more of a purple, and the red is going to mix with that blue and make it a little bit darker. And this is going to be a great base color for our water. And I want to go ahead and bring this water on in over here, and see how I'm painting right into my green. So I can start shaping up the bank here by using the shape of the water. So I want you to stop thinking about painting all these individual parts and think about painting one shape into another shape. And as this water comes forward, it actually gets a little darker. So I'm going to go ahead and suggest that. You know, I said we want the local colors, we don't want to pick out too many varieties. But if the local color changes just subtly, we can pick that up. So I'm using the cadmium red light, ultramarine blue, and I'm making this a little bit more dark here. Now be careful about the bank of the water. I see so many paintings where it looks like the water is just going to slide right off, or it should just flood right in here, and that's because the painter wasn't careful about the bank. These banks are almost always going to be very horizontal. So this is the time to catch that. If you start to see it slant, see if you can go ahead and pick out your shape. So we step it forward here a little bit because it goes around a turn there, but you can still see that it's still horizontal. There's a tendency to try to paint the side of the water like at an angle because we know about how roads go in, but even when that happens with water, it steps back with horizontal lines. Because you can see if I were to take this dark and do this, it looks like the water should just go right off of there. So I want to keep that nice shape there. And there's even some warm color in the water too. As we come forward, we can see the bank. We can see the underside of the water. I mean, we can see the bank of the water through the water, which creates this nice warm orange color, but it's a toned down orange. So I'm using burnt sienna, yellow ochre, and I'm going to go right back into all that. The trick here is that the value is almost identical to the value of the purple in the water. So it's not too much lighter, it's not too much darker. And you know, if you've watched my other videos, I talk about the magic of this. When you have two different temperatures, but they're the same value, that's going to create vibrancy in your painting. And so we can put that warm down, and then we can come back over with some of the cool, and I got too much cadmium red there, you can see it's trying to make it very purple. And come back and mix over top of that, and just, okay. Alright, so at this stage we want to go ahead and move to brushes. So you want to get your darks, your darker darks, your local colors laid in. If you want to suggest some highlights, let's do that. Let's go in, before we move to the brushes, let's go ahead and pick out some extra light areas. Now these are areas that are really going to be, you know, the shining stars of the show, so to speak. They're really going to stand out. So I'm going to mix some nice, bright, vibrant green using a lot of this cadmium yellow light. And I'm going to pick out some areas right around where I said my center of interest is. And this is where sunlight's really hitting these leaves here. And be careful when you have these vibrant colors on your paper towel or on your brush, because it's so easy to overdo it, and then they're going to lose their power. There's a lot to be said for the power of reserve. When you just have a little bit of this, a little bit of that here and there, really creates some vibrancy. But if you have it everywhere, then it kills the vibrancy. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and move into the paint, do some brush work. And I'm not going to get too complicated with the brushes. I want to keep using big brushes, nothing smaller than like a 4 or a 6. And we're just going to use flat brushes. So here I've got like I think I've got a 6 and a couple of 4s. I'm going to start with the 6. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the sky colors. Before I lose all this nice light paint down here, I'm going to mix up the sky color again. So ultramarine blue and white, and just a little bit of yellow in there. And this value can be slightly darker, so if I take it here, you can see right there that is slightly darker. You can see how that stands out. But watch what happens when I come over here and I use it to paint where the sky comes through the trees. It works because there's less light coming through, and that's going to make it slightly darker. So you're given the illusion here that you're looking through the trees to the sky, which is what I want. You see how I'm holding the paintbrush? I'm holding it like I'm like a sword. I'm not cramped up like a pencil, you know. Step back from your work, paint from the shoulder, hold your paintbrush like this. A couple other things, try to get your canvas in the shade and your palette in the shade. It's going to be a lot easier to mix colors. I have it in the sun so that everybody there can see, so that you guys can see the colors. But generally when I paint, I try to find a shady spot, or I turn my canvas away from the sun. And so we're going to be weaving this. We're going to be bringing the sky into the trees. And then I'm going to take this is a number 4 flat brush. I'm going to come right back in. At this stage you can really scoop up the paint. You don't want a whole lot of medium in your brush. You want it to be nice and thick. I want that to be a little bit oranger, so I'm going to add some cadmium red to my mixture. Yeah. And then I'm going to take this color and I'm going to paint the tree into the sky. So it's like a weaving process. And just suggesting some little branches coming out here. And by pulling those branches out in front of all this, it really pushes that back there, so that's good. And I'm still looking at these local colors here. I'm going into them just a little bit lighter. I'm going to go ahead and make up a nice light, a little bit cooler green to define what's going on back here on this bank. Now it does have some orange to it because the red is going to neutralize the green a little bit, so I'm adding a little bit of that cadmium red to it. So even though it's a little cooler, it's not like an aquamarine blue, bluish green. It's got a little bit of a red or an orange mixed into it, which is dulling down the green color. And now I'm going to go ahead and just pick out some shapes here where these trees are on this bank. Now I want to break up that shape, and I can do that with my sky color again. just here's a little bit. Add some bluish green to that. So just to break it up just a little bit, okay? Now let me go ahead and describe some of these plants on the bank. I'm going to mix up a purple with cadmium red light, ultramarine blue, and then I'm going to add some dark green to it. It's already mixed here on the palette, and that's going to make a nice dark deep green. And watch how I hold the brush. Watch what I'm doing here. I'm actually moving the brush out, up and out, and creating these little tiny brush strokes. So I'm pushing the brush, and it's actually pushing the bristles of the brush out, and it's creating a bunch of little tiny brush strokes that emulate some of the grass shapes there on the bank. And I want to cut back in so you can see how I'm weaving. See, watch now, I'll weave that water back into that shape. So now we'll come down here, because I don't want anything to be too bulky. You know, nature is very a lot of nature is light and airy, so you don't want anything too massive, or it'll start to look like you know, we don't want big blocky sculpture-like areas right along the bank where we have this nice delicate grass. And I also have my metal brush washer out here, and I keep Gamsol paint thinner in it so that I can clean my brushes as I go. That's really important, because you don't want to get your brushes too dirty. And at this point I'm going to go ahead and lay out a little bit more paint. It's another thing too, if you know, like I said, make sure you're squeezing out enough paint. It takes a lot of paint to paint a painting, and many paintings are ruined by the painter just not putting out enough paint. There's a nice little sunlit bank out there that will help pull our eye in. The trick here is to get it light enough that it reads, but I don't want it to be so yellow that it competes with our foreground yellows. So I'm going to add enough white to it to make it light, and then I'm going to add a little bit of this olive green. So see how I'm mixing into other colors that are already on the palette. So it's a nice light green, but it's not going to compete with this vibrant green in the foreground. And this is going to be our little sunlit bank out here. And then there's some shadowed parts of the bank too that are a nice, cool, bluish green. So lots of ultramarine blue in this. Create some little areas here. And then there's also some little areas where some sunlit parts of the trees are popping through here. So just a little bit of suggestion of detail, not too much. I promise that real soon I'm going to be putting together some more advanced classes, and that's where I'm going to talk more about developing these paintings. So I'm specifically keeping these in an unfinished state. I want to teach you to lay in paintings and get the basics down before you try to finish them and get too caught up with adding details, because like building a house, if you don't learn how to lay down a solid foundation, then you're going to be in trouble if you start finishing it. So I really want you to think about that. Well, we've got some ripples in the water now. The wind's blowing across the water, so that's going to create some nice darker shapes on the water. So I'm going to use ultramarine blue and burnt sienna and white and create this nice darker blue color. And then I'm going to hold the brush like this, and then just real quickly I'm just going to come in and just hit some of these darker shapes. Now the thing about these is perspective works on these shapes too, so as these shapes are coming forward, they're getting bigger, and as they're going off into the distance, they're getting smaller. So watch this. Up here we have some big shapes, right? Some big dark lines there. And then as they move off into the distance, we're going to use less pressure on the brush and a little bit of a shorter brush stroke to create the smaller shapes. So that's starting to create depth in the water. You see how it pushes that water back. There's a nice shadow on that bank way out there. We don't want it too dark. Now if we just focus on it, it's going to look nice and dark. But if we compare it to our darks in the foreground, we'll see that it's not that dark. So I want to be careful here. So I'm mixing up a nice bluish green. But like I said, we don't want to get it too dark. We want to keep it back there in the distance. And then there's some little shapes like this that come in here. Bring some sunlit areas back down over top of it. There's a nice tree in this foreground. It's a nice purple color, and it stands out against all this dark. It's kind of a lighter purple. So this is a good example of where you want to be observant. You know, a lot of times you might think, oh, a tree trunk is going to be dark, but in relation to the shadow behind it, it's actually a little lighter. So you can see this grayish purple tree right here. It's just a little bit lighter. I don't want it too light. There are some areas of it that are getting some sunlight, and we can add those at the end. I'm going to come up here with it and see how I'm drawing out these branches. Watch this. Let me make a nice dark, a little bit darker here, not too dark, a purple. Now I start right here where this branch comes off of this tree trunk, and see these leaves here? They're on a branch, so I want to be conscious of that. So I'm going to come out here with this branch and watch. See, as I get out here, and then I just kind of pull off, up and out, it creates the nice shape of a tree branch. We can do it again right up in here. And the tree branches are going to be going different ways. You know, some go up and out, some go over. So don't have all your tree branches just pointing straight out. You know, these are very organic shapes that these tree branches make. A good way to do this is twist your brush around as you go. You hold it like that, you twist that brush, it's going to really emulate some of those shapes. And some of these branches can even come down and out like this. And you see, I don't need a real tiny brush. I'm still using this like number 4. I'm just using the tip of it. And some branches, they don't have to necessarily relate. They don't have to connect. You know, they could just be popping in and out here. You can just see one here. You know, everything has to relate, but what I mean is it doesn't have to be like, oh, you see where every single branch goes. You want to make sure you draw a couple that are very accurate. But then you can suggest some too, and your mind will tell you, oh, well, they go somewhere because it's a tree branch. And I want to bring some nice green again, some sunlit leaves and stuff in front of these to break them up and to really weave them into the painting. Now there's a couple little spots where there's some sunlight on there. We can hit this up with a nice kind of a yellow color. This is like a sandy color that I just made with some yellow that was on the palette and some white. And I'm just going to pop this in just in a few little areas. I don't want to overdo it again. I got to be careful. And now this is also a great color, this sandy color. I can add a little bit of yellow ochre and a little bit of burnt sienna to it. And I'm going to get some of this color of these rocks down here. Now, where we were doing the foliage real organic like, with these rocks, what we can do is take a big flat brush, like a number 10 or a number 12, and get a lot of the paint on our brush, and then use the flatness of this brush to really suggest this flat surface of these rocks and how they're up here in the foreground. And some of them even stick out into the water here a little bit, so we want to hit the sunlit parts of them first. We can come back and draw some shadows around them here in a second. You'll see how effective that can be. And I don't want to lose my shapes here. I've got these nice shapes pointing us in towards this area, so I want to be aware of them as I go. And while I've got this nice light color too, there's some nice light flowers. There's some little yellow flowers that are up in here. So I just want to pop just a little suggestion of some of these flowers, just to give a feeling of, you know, how the sunlight's dancing on some of the flowers and that sort of thing. So hopefully you can see some of that. I'll try to back up a little bit so you can see, you know, the landscape, but I also want you to be able to see some of the detail on what I'm doing too. It looks like there's a glare on my palette, so you might not be able to see a lot of the colors that I'm mixing, but let's see if I can turn that up a little bit, if that helps. Like I said, part of what I want to do is when I do these advanced videos, they'll be a lot more professional with the camera work. I want to work out a couple different angles, definitely get a camera right on the palette, and then have one that's on the landscape and the painting too, so that you can kind of see both of that. So bear with me on these beginner videos. That's why I'm just putting them out there, just so people can kind of get the hang of the process. I'm going to mix up a dark, warm color here and hit some shadows along the edge of these rocks. So now I'm doing a little bit of drawing. Just a suggestion of detail is all it takes at this point, and your mind starts filling in the blanks. Starting to create a little bit of form in these rocks. And I'm not necessarily putting these shadows exactly where they are, but more where they look good in the painting. So I'm thinking about moving your eye around the painting, and that's what I want you to get in the habit of doing. And I apologize for, I know you probably couldn't see any of those colors that I was mixing. I just realized how glary, how much glare is on the palette. But as far as mixing colors, it's really just a matter of experience. So the more you do it, the better you're going to get at it. It's just like anything else, playing piano or something, or playing guitar. The more that you do it, the more you're going to just know exactly where the colors are that you need, and how to get them when you need them. The most important lesson that I want you to take away from these paintings is that I'm not overly concerned with detail, that I'm focused on big shapes coming together and design, and the importance of design in a painting. Because I think that's overlooked so often. So many people want to focus on, well, how did I mix this color, or you know, what type of paint am I using, and you know, what shape of brushes am I using, and really all these things are pretty inconsequential to the big picture, and they, you know, you can almost use any colors if your values are correct. So value and design is one of the biggest lessons that I want you to think about, and simplicity, simplifying things. It doesn't have to be super complicated, you know, especially when you're first starting off. The last thing you want is this daunting task of having to create a super detailed picture. Or so there's some areas here in the water where there's some dark reflections that come in and break up this purple, so that's going to be nice. We can use this to our advantage. And see, by having the big shape in the front and then the smaller shape back here, creating that depth in the picture. And we even have that going on over here too. Excuse me. Oh, I think I just inhaled a bug. Like I said, there's lots of fun things you'll discover when painting outside. All right. And it's at this stage where we want to add our most vibrant colors. So you want to save your vibrant colors to the very end. So I've got a nice blue here where there's some of this water is choppy in the foreground. It's really reflecting some nice blue color of the sky. So I'm going to go ahead and pop in some of those very vibrant blues right there. And I want to go ahead and pick up some real thick, bright green, lots of cadmium yellow, very little medium, lots of paint, and I want to use it to pull your eye up and around the painting. So watch how this happens here. I'm squinting down while I'm doing this. This is also pulling these trees forward too. So I'm using texture, I'm using value, I'm using color, and the intensity of the color too, to pull this area forward. And at the same time, I'm offering a bridge for your eye to go up and around and get involved in this composition. Because there's so much green in this painting, it's not going to hurt to create a little bit of red. There's the orangish red. There's a couple dead leaves up in here in the foreground, and just a couple of them are going to look really good. They're just suggesting this sort of a darker. I'm using burnt sienna, cadmium red, cadmium yellow light, and just a couple little hints of this is really going to look nice with all this green. It'll create a nice color harmony, and it's going to help pull that area forward again. I want to bring some of this green grass down here in the foreground. Is nice. You can see at this point I'm really scooping up the paint and laying it on. And it's not a perfect mixture of paint. I mean, really, it's kind of crazy when you look at it up close what's going on my brush. Huge pile of paint, all different colors in it, and then I'm going to use that right in here in the foreground, and it's just going to create a nice textured area of what looks like grass of all different types. And I'm going to use a little bit of ivory black and mix it into this purple. There's a purple up here, and I want a nice dark purple. I'm going to use this to draw a little bit. So like I said, I don't want you drawing too much, but if you are going to draw, it's at the very last stages of your painting that you're going to want to do this. And I'm going to use it to kind of outline some areas here of this tree. Right here that's nice and pulls your eye up into the composition. And if there's some little dark spots, these are what you call accents. So your brightest brights are your highlights, your darkest darks are your accents, and these are going to be little shadowed areas in your foreground, shadows underneath of rocks. You definitely don't want any of these off in the distance because these are going to pull the area forward. And see how I'm introducing a variety of greens into this. So that's one of the big struggles I think that a lot of painters face this time of year is just, you know, they use the same green for a lot of their greens. And this is going to be one of the benefits of mixing all your greens is there's just so much variety to all the different mixtures that you can get. So it's not just, oh, when I need green, I just grab my Viridian and that's my green, and then it looks boring because all your greens are the same. But you can see I've got this nice dark cool green here in the shadow. I've got a nice warm vibrant yellow green. I've got some orangish grayish greens in the distance, a lighter sort of a lemony green out here for the bank of the distant side there of the river or the lake. So mixing your colors is really going to help you. That's why I love, you know, working with the primaries and learning how to mix all the different secondaries and all the different variations of those. And just like the variety in the greens, I can get some variety in the blue. I can suggest some blue here in the water. But notice that I'm still careful not to get the value too light because I don't want it to compete with the sky. And I think I'm going to stop right there with this one. Like I said, when I put together these advanced classes, which I promise they're coming soon, I've been working on a lot of stuff. I've got a show coming up actually tomorrow evening in Blowing Rock, North Carolina at Blowing Rock Frameworks and Gallery. I'll be there from 5 to 8. I've got a new exhibit going up there, so I've got about 20 new pieces on display there. And I've had to go travel a little bit and do some family stuff too. But I am going to, after this show, you know, I've got my calendar's cleared for a couple weeks. I'm going to really focus on putting out an advanced level class, and you'll see how we can take all of this information that I've been teaching and all of these starts and all these basic shapes and really push them to the next level. So I hope everybody will keep an eye out for that. I really appreciate everybody watching. As usual, it's a pleasure to paint for you and to share all this information with you. I love seeing what everybody's up to. If you have questions or you want to email me photos of your work, you can email me at kyle.buckland@gmail.com. If you haven't subscribed, you know, hit like and subscribe on the videos, and you can click the bell the icon there to receive notifications for when I upload new videos. Really excited about all the new subscribers. We're pushing, getting closer to 3,000 subscribers. So thank you so much to all the new subscribers. I really hope you're enjoying all the videos and going back and looking at the older videos, because like I said, I'm really building on a lot of this knowledge and information that I'm putting forth here. Remember to relax, get out there, paint what you love, find things that you enjoy painting. I mean, that's really going to make a big difference, because then you'll have a reason to paint. So be careful not to just go out and plop down and paint any old thing. Find something that you're interested in. You know, find something that really takes your breath away, and then try to paint what aspect of the subject matter you respond to the most. And that's going to be how you create a successful painting, because you're going to have something to paint about. Relax, have fun, push paint around, make a mess. Don't forget to wear your gloves so you're not squishing all this paint into your hands. If you have short questions, you can put them in the comments below. I'll try to answer them. It's like I said, I've been really busy, but I will go back and look at all the comments, and if I haven't gotten to your previous comments, I'm not skipping over you. I just haven't had time to get to them. So thanks so much for watching, and stay tuned for another video.